Hi. Since each Australian state has its own native Christmas bush, you see them on the screen, maybe you are planning to plant one in your yard, whether it's preschool, school or home, which is fantastic. But does planting native Christmas bushes, does it mean that we're bringing Indigenous and Christian traditions together, or is it tokenistic? Well, that's what we will address today. I'm Jan from Sustainable Butterflies, it's all on my website, and I'm continuing with this inquiry into whether we can bring Indigenous and Christian traditions together, or if this attempt is a paradox, and how can we bring them together, right? Now, in the previous video I shared my theory, but more importantly, you heard from educators, including 2 interviews. Today, you will also hear from an educator, a Christian educator, but before we go to the interview, let me share with you 3 areas where it's relatively easy to see similarities. But that's the issue, right? Because as one teacher commented, merely finding common themes should not be confused for philosophical convergence. The point is to trying to establish whether there is actual common ground or whether it's just tokenism. So let me give you 3 examples. So the first example is native Christmas bushes. And to me, it seems quite non-tokenistic, because if you plant a native Christmas bush in a yard, it will be there year after year, instead of just cutting that introduced pine and having there for a few weeks. So to me, it seems like it's quite genuine, and it's similar to in the indigenous tradition respect for nature, having plants and looking after them for many years. The second example is smoke. So in the indigenous tradition is the smoking ceremony, and in the Christian tradition is the incense burning in the churches, and which has ceremonial, spiritual, religious aspect to it, and in other religions as well. So again, the question is there actual common ground there, or are they just common themes? And the third example is fire. So you probably know that when God appeared to Abraham on Mount Sinai, I think it was, the bushes were burning. When then he received the 10 commandments, the bushes were burning too. So fire has that religious sacred meaning. And in the indigenous tradition, as far as I can tell, dancing around fire, that's been known in many indigenous traditions for thousands of years. So again, in all 3 examples, the key question is, does doing these things, planting native bush or smoking ceremony or lighting a fire, maybe not lighting a fire in the preschools, obviously, but does that mean that it proves that there is actual common ground between both traditions, or is it just tokenism? That's the key question. And by the way, the second and third example, smoke and fire, it's not my idea. I'm drawing on an article linked in the video description. So if you're interested, have a look. Well, now let's hear from a Christian educator. I'm fortunate enough to be here with Leaf, who is a Christian educator, and Leaf spent 7 years in Thailand and in India. She has lots of experience. Okay, Leaf, when you think of these 3 analogies, native Christmas bush, smoke and fire, is there actual common ground, or is it tokenism to just do the things that appear to be similar, and then patting ourselves on our back how amazing we are? What do you think about this?
I think that there are deeper things to tackle first. I think that we need to be talking about how the Bible talks about humans being made in the image of God, that each person has been made with love, and that we have this horrible story in these lands known as Australia. We have this big story of pain, and as a white person who's living on Dharawal country, sitting on stolen land right now, that's something pretty heavy for me to reckon with. So if I'm just going to go into my school and plant a Christmas bush without tackling this deep issue of the sacredness of the Indigenous people of this land and the crimes that have happened against them, then it is tokenistic.
Okay, then thank you very much. That's fantastic. Now that begs another question, because I've been thinking, it's quite new to me, but I've been thinking about, would it be possible, do you think, for educators and teachers in schools, preschools, early learning centers to craft and develop something like what I call a Tokenism Buster, which would be like a method for determining what is genuine and what is tokenistic? What do you think?
Yes, I love that idea of a tokenism buster. The first thing that springs to mind is if it feels easy, it's probably a tokenistic thing, because racial justice is a complicated, messy, confusing thing. It's a legacy of like violence and abuse. It's basically like a family story of abuse in a way. As a white person, I've sat on the side of benefiting materially. I live off the wealth that was stolen, that is in my lineage. And my Indigenous brothers and sisters are living from lineages that are about the crimes that we have that my lineage has committed against their lineage. So if it feels like, oh, easy, I'll just plant a Christmas bush, there's a token, that's too easy. But also, am I just coming up with these ideas in my own head as a white person, or am I asking the people whose country I'm sitting on? Because in the lands known as Australia, there are so many countries, so many languages. So there's no generalization to make, really, I don't think, either about Indigenous people, but who, like right now on Darawal country, what do these people say about what I should be doing, what our schools should be teaching?
For you, as a Christian educator, do you see both traditions, Christian and Indigenous, to be different or similar to each other?
Yeah, I see them to be similar, because if we talk about Christianity, okay, there's two ways of looking at it. We can look at the empire Christianity that came around and shoved Bibles in people's hands and forced people into mission schools and all of this stuff. So the colonizing kind of idea of weaponized Christianity. Or we can think of actually Indigenous Christianity, which is if God is real and if God created this whole world with love, and if God walked in the garden with people, those people probably looked like Indigenous people. They were the Adam and Eve that God walked and talked with. So then the question is, what can they teach us about God? What can they teach us about Christ?
Where do you see the main differences?
Yeah, and this comes back to the colonizing project. Like, if God has said that God has created these people, Indigenous people of all these countries, with love, and created in the image of God, filled with this sacred, holy fire of God, and then the colonizing project has come and said they're not even human, or this or that, that is a huge clash. And that means that we need to be a part of repairing that. And to repair means there's a dialogue and there's people coming together. As white people, we often don't even listen to people to Indigenous people talking to us. And so I think as educators, if we're ever going to learn from people whose country we're sitting on, like if we ask a consultant to come in, they should be paid top dollar, like, because we need to pay reparations as well as we need to pay for their time. So nobody should be expected to come in for free, because these things are so triggering and we just expect people to come and give us their time as though it's nothing. So, and we should be giving the highest respect to anyone who would share that wisdom with us.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Okay, Fantastic. Now, and where do you see the main similarities between both traditions, Christian and Indigenous?
Yeah, I think that the sacred scriptures, the Bible, talks so much about creation having a voice. Like creation is seen to be like a woman who is about to give birth and groaning as she gives birth. And as I walk around taking photos in Darawal country, which is so beautiful, often I think of the voice of Darawal country crying and groaning for her people, because her people have been treated so badly. And I think about the heart of God, God the Trinity, God the dance, the sacred dance of three, that God is grieved. God is like, I listen to all these stories of Indigenous people. There's a 40 Stories project that I found online about believers, Indigenous believers telling their stories. And they talk about the women wailing because the children were taken, the children were stolen. Mm-hmm. And I think about God as a mother wailing for her children. And I think about the land mourning and wanting her people to come back and be put in a right relationship as was intended by God. So to get back to the point, the whole Bible is filled with like, it says, the sky proclaims the glory of God. Day after day, the sky pours forth speech. That basically there's a language being spoken to every human, which is not just written down, but written in the sky, written in the land, and all of that. But then I think about Christ, and Christ spoke in stories. He talked about the mustard seeds. He talked about look at the lilies of the field. They don't worry about tomorrow. Look at the birds of the air. Like, it's so much connected to the land and the earth.
Okay, awesome. And then, according to you, what is the best way of reconciling or balancing both traditions?
Yeah, I really hope and believe that followers of Christ could be the people that lead the way in coming together. And like the Bible talks about reconciliation, that it's something very close to the heart of God. And I, even today, as I was listening to the stories of the Indigenous believers, they were talking about how they felt so moved towards forgiveness. And I thought, it's so gracious of them. But actually, we as white people need to be moved towards lament and repair. Like, why do they have to do all the work to come to us? Why can't we have soft hearts and come towards them?
Okay, thank you very much. I really appreciate your time. I'm curious because this video, I'm not proving anything. I'm not trying to prove anything. I am rather thinking this through. It's really complex on its own terms, let alone thinking about how can you bring these both traditions together, right? So if you have any comments or references or opinions, please share them, right? So that we all learn. This is about improving, and share them in the comments, or let me know, or email me, whatever. I am Jan from Sustainable Butterflies, and yeah, you have a great day. See you later.